All right, good morning. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today. I'm excited to be here with the Hackett Group. They've been joining us today to really share some exciting and interesting statistics and stats from a survey that they've just completed on working capital. And I think there's not a business out there today or AR department who's not eager to, continue to whittle the DSOs down. So you're going to get some real practical advice today. So before we get started, myself, I'm Becky Carr. I run lead marketing here at Billtrust. Brian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Becky. And let me get my camera on here. So yeah, I'm Brian DeGraw, Associate Principal with the Hackett Group. Hopefully some of you know me. You work with the Hackett Group. I lead our global customer cash advisory practice, working with clients to understand how they can improve their processes from order management all the way through dispute management. I also focus on market intelligence. So as an analyst in this space, I am looking at emerging features and functionality within software providers. So I'm looking forward to today's session, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Istvan.
Hello, everyone. My name is István Bodó. I'm a Senior Director in Hackett's Finance Transformation Practice. My main focus area is working capital optimization, and within or under the umbrella of end-to-end working capital optimization, the end-to-end order-to-cash process optimization from process and technology perspective. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
All right, so our agenda is to really take a look. Hackett Group will take us through the findings of their survey. It's certainly very appropriate in today's macroeconomic environment. Then we're going to look at how AR can be really turned into a growth lever for your business. And finally, I'll come back and talk a little bit about AI-powered AI and how it's really becoming a foundational need in order to achieve the outcomes that you're looking for. Then we'll open it up for questions at any point during the course of this discussion or this presentation. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A and we'll be sure to get to them. So without further ado, Brian, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, great. And certainly we want to have Q&A throughout the session, but we're going to start with asking a question to everyone on today's poll. So what is your top priority for improving working capital in 2026? And believe it or not, that's just a few short months, weeks away. So are you looking to automate your collections and cash application processes? Are you focused on reducing your DSO, improving your forecasting accuracy? And of course, that's going to be selfishly around cash flow, strengthening your credit risk management, or expanding digital invoicing adoption. So Allison is going to open up that poll for you. We'll just give you a few seconds to pick your choices. And of course, we made it tough. You may want to pick all of the above, but we made it a single choice. All right, so we have results already. And not surprising, DSO is part of the title of today's session, and that is the top one, looking how to reduce DSO. And along with that, closely following is automating collections and cash app, which if you're not doing that, you're going to have a challenge reducing DSO in a manual environment, and then improving your cash forecasting accuracy. So everyone on today's call, you've come to the right place, because those are some of the key topics we're going to be talking about. All right, so what I'd like to start with is Hackett's key issue study highlights. And this is a study that we do on an annual basis. It's actually in flight right now. We publish it early every year. But if you could, I think everyone's using some form of AI today and asking whether it's Copilot or OpenAI, ChatGPT. If you could type in, show me a chart of what it looks like to be asked to do more with less. There's a chance that something like this would come up. And what we're seeing is that, there's optimism, and this has been throughout 2025, optimism that revenue is going to grow. As a result, the workload within finance teams is also going to grow. But finance leaders, the CFO, is not going to get approval to hire more, and not getting more budget to cover even existing costs. So the challenge of, do more with equal or less is what the picture shows. Now, the one silver lining in the story is on the far right, and that's finance technology spend. So what our data showed is that investments in technology, whether they're in flight, in RFI, they're planned, they're not being put on hold, which is something we've seen in past years, where if times are tight, that's unfortunately something people look to first is, okay, let's stop that project or not invest. That is not the case in today's environment, which is very positive for everyone of you who may be in this situation. The opportunity to find that gap in staffing and costs is going to be supplemented through the technologies that we're seeing in today's market. So top finance priorities and initiatives. Optimize cash flow performance, liquidity, and working capital. And again, you can use some different terms, but you could also say we need to improve our DSO. That's optimizing cash flow and working capital, certainly. So that's the top priority that we're seeing for finance. And one I'm going to share in a moment that's evolved over the past 5 years to make that top mark there. And in terms of initiatives, and I'm highlighting the one that relates to that top priority, is launch formal initiatives to improve working capital. And of course, specifically in the world of receivables management, how can we improve that DSO figure? So this is the evolution that I wanted to share, specifically of optimizing cash flow. It broke through nearly 5 years ago as number 10. So it was it made the top 10, but it was at the bottom of the list. And as you can appreciate, someone like myself who lives and breathes customer to cash processes and improving DSO, I was happy to see it. Okay, it finally broke through. And then watching it over again, the past 4 years, moved up to number 7 and held there in 22 and 23, moved up to number 2 in 24, and then finally became the top priority. And I'm not a betting person, but I'm going to put a little money down to say that it's going to hold at number 1 for quite some time. I don't see the importance around managing working capital and cash flow being something that could be usurped by something else. If anything, it's going to be closely tied to how are we making investments in technology that's going to maintain and continue to improve our cash flow performance. So next, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Istvan, who's going to talk about the Hackett Group's working capital survey, which again is something that we do on an annual basis, typically publishes around the mid to late summertime. So if that's not something you've seen, you can certainly find some of the highlights anywhere in the public domain, but luckily you're on today's session, and Istvan's going to provide you some really detailed information around it. So Istvan, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Brian. So yeah, just to piggyback on what Brian mentioned, in case you're not familiar, with our working capital survey, this is an annual working capital survey, what we are conducting now for almost 20 years, right? And it starts with a very extensive data analysis, and then we are publishing our results end of July. You might have seen some of the findings in the CFO magazine, or in the Wall Street Journal, or on our own website. So this annual working capital survey and scorecard calculates the working capital performance based on the latest publicly available financial statements of the 1,000 largest non-financial companies, right? So these are the companies we are usually covering, really the largest non-financial organizations headquartered in the United States. Our survey takes an industry-based approach to ranking companies according to the key 4 working capital metrics: DSO, DIO, DPO, and the cash conversion cycle, which is like the overarching metric for working capital efficiency, right? And then in this survey, we are calculating beyond the usual metrics also the working capital opportunity, what organizations could release focusing on optimizing DSO, DIO, and DPO. And then to come up with this working capital opportunity, what we're going to present here on this subsequent slide, we calculate this based on the difference in DSO, DIO, and DPO performance on company level against the upper quartile performance at industry level, right? So that's just to give you some context of what is the opportunity, how we are coming up with this opportunity. Now, looking at DSO specifically, right? Our study revealed that there is a significant working capital opportunity organizations could target on to release. The overall study identified 1.7 trillion in excess working capital tied up across the largest 1,000 companies. And as you can see here, the biggest opportunity area is actually within receivables. In receivables, there are $600 billion tied up as opportunity. This represents really 35% of the total opportunity. And as you could see on the previous slide, this excess working capital opportunity is actually, or was actually significantly increasing over the past 5 years. So now this increase in the overall excess working capital opportunity within AR is driven obviously by the revenue changes, but then also this is also driven by persistent performance differences between median and upper quartile organizations. So from an overall perspective, our study revealed that there is a significant performance gap between the median and upper quartile DSO. This is the 18 days, right? So we can see here that median organizations are lagging significantly behind upper quartile organizations when it comes to DSO performance management, and reducing this performance gap to upper quartile, as you can see here, can drive significant opportunities to release cash tied up in excess accounts receivable, right? What is really important to focus on, given the high interest rates environments, and also the fact that there is a lot of pressure from organizations to extend the DPO, extend payment terms, right? So I think we can move to the next one, Brian, to give the audience here a bit of let's say a wider perspective on the overall findings regarding working capital performance. So as I mentioned, there's significant opportunity to improve working capital. 1.7 trillion is the excess working capital opportunity. And if we look at specific metrics and how these metrics change over time, then we can see that in 2024, which is the last year we analyzed, the working capital performance improve, but this improvement is only driven by the DPO performance improvement. As you can see here, unfortunately, DIO was lagging, and so was DSO. DSO was deteriorating for 2 consecutive years now. So it's again imperative to look into this, right, and try to find opportunities to improve DSO, because there is pressure, to improve the DPO. And as you can see here, certain organizations, certain industries were really able to improve the DPO, and then this will, create pressure at your end or at other, at the overall population, or the overall company population, and to improve DSO as well, right? And then next we can talk about, what top performance organizations are doing, right, to optimize working capital and release the excess working capital opportunity tied up in receivables. And then Brian and also Becky will provide here additional context, but working with top performing organizations, we can see that credit risk assessment is one of those top process areas where they leveraging technology and AI to predict, customer credit worthiness or potential changes. They also leverage technology to, accelerate dispute management, mainly the review and approval of various deductions, right, to reduce this way the cycle time and also release cash. They also put a lot of emphasis on predictive analytics for predicting payment behavior, and then also then adjusting the collection methodologies or the collection strategies according to payment behavior changes. And they also leverage the vast capabilities of AI to analyze in-depth payment terms, contract terms, and really flag almost real-time any discrepancies when it comes to pricing or other discrepancies across agreements, again, with the objective to release cash flow and improve DSO. Thank you, and then
great
to you, Brian.
Thanks, it's fun. And that last one is really important. When I know when we're working with organizations trying to improve their DSO and we start to dig into contracts and terms, unfortunately, a lot of times the answer we share with them is you're doing a lot of this to yourselves, in terms of term extension. So, why is my DSO growing? Well, you're cutting deals and you're giving extended terms. So what I'm going to do now is dig a bit more into the nuts and bolts of what we look at and what we share, what we measure in what Hackett calls customer to cash. So what I'm sharing here is Hackett's end-to-end processes that are within what we call C2C. And I know some of you call it order to cash, invoice to cash, lots of different acronyms for it, but to level set on the processes that we focus on, from credit all the way through dispute management, and why each one has plays a key role in the process of ensuring that you're making good decisions on who you want to do business with, how you want to do business with them, executing flawlessly in terms of timing and accuracy. That especially comes important in your order management, your customer billing, cash application. When you establish the relationship with a new customer, did you talk about how do we do business together? What do they need to see on their invoice? What do you need to see on their orders so the information is accurate? I recently heard a great quote about the space of aging receivables or disputed receivables is, do you have a debt problem or do you have a data problem? And for many of us today, it's more around, we have a data problem. If we had clean data, we'd be getting paid on time and probably have minimal issues around having to collect or dispute. Now, that said, something always goes wrong. I haven't met an organization yet who says we have 100% current receivables. So the goal is to, at the end here is to mitigate quickly the existing issue. And then, of course, look at where you can improve from analyzing data of reasons and root causes to help disputes go away. Now, one of the things that Hackett looks at and works with clients on is truly understanding what is their service delivery model around this end-to-end customer to cash process. Holistically, we look at these 6 elements and not in a linear fashion, but holistically looking across all of these and saying, where are we today? Where's those opportunities to improve? If we're making changes, what are the impacts on the other elements of our service delivery model? So, I would challenge anyone, and never say never. Someone may come up with one, but as you look at each one of these and say, okay, we're gonna invest in new tools and technologies to improve the process. You can't do that in isolation, right? Because you need to understand how are those tools going to enable our process. So what does our service design look like today? And does it need to evolve? And that's a very common component of a technology implementation, is looking at your what is the as is and what is the to be process. Are we going to have to train people on the new technology? Most likely. So what does our human capital process look like today? Skills and competencies. What is our approach to training? You have to touch on that. Hopefully the new technology and the improvement is going to yield performance metric improvement. So what are we measuring today? So you're going to have to go over and look at your analytics and your information management. And certainly, a big element today is master data management. Coming off of the quote I just made around a data problem versus a debt problem. Do you have a clean customer master data file? And do you have a very good process to govern that data when it comes to new record creation, modifications, and retiring records. So all of these play into how you're executing your process and what does it look like today, and how would you like to design it better to meet customer needs. And at the end of the day, if I was to redraw the graphic in the center, those little, I can't call them stick figures because they're all round, but they essentially they should represent your customers. So what are your customer needs? How do your customers want to interact with you? And then you're going to design your delivery around those needs and objectives of both growing your business, and certainly you grow it around meeting customer needs. So in addition to key metrics, which Hackett is best known for, is our benchmarks. What is the staffing levels, the costs, the cycle times, the error rates. We also look at how are digital world-class organizations, or the top performers in a space, how are they achieving those levels of performance? So what's represented here, and there's a lot on here, and we're certainly going to be sharing the slides following the session. But these are key characteristics that we observe of these digital world-class organizations, specifically in the customer to cash processes. A couple of ways that I'll describe at a high level is discipline around policies. So on the upper right, where you can see, having credit policy in place, and it's dynamic and it's measured. And so if you look across from credit policy, you can see performance measurement is a cornerstone. So knowing where you are today, knowing what reasonable targets are based on history and objectives, and then continuing to measure that. So measurement is a cornerstone. Policy and compliance to policies is a cornerstone. And another important thing, I just touched on it, is master data management. So those are really foundational. If I was to redraw this slide in some way in terms of what's core foundational in terms of building, using the analogy of building a house, those would have to be at the foundation and being real solid if you want to be able to be effective and execute on the other elements, which are all important. But it's, again, it's challenging to have harmonized payment terms and controls around that. It's going to be challenging to, create a accurate and timely order management process if you don't know how to measure it, or you're not measuring it. Your customer master data is all around, and you don't have any foundational policies or standard operating procedures in place. So all critical. And again, as you reflect on this slide later, it's a great one to get in a room with your team and say, where are we on these? How would you rate us? Pick your choice of a scale, but where are we today, and what are we doing well, and where are opportunities for us to improve? Now, of course, it wouldn't be a session with the Hackett Group if we didn't share some metrics, which we love to collect and look at and analyze. So some key ones, obviously, process costs. And what is the definition of process costs for the Hackett Group is identifying the fully loaded labor costs. And any outsourcing, if you just chose to outsource some of the elements of collections, that would be included in here. So process cost per collection contact. And you can see that the cost is certainly lower, 67% lower for digital world class than peer group. And I will say, for any of you who have your calculators out and are familiar with the method of calculating that, you're going to say, well, that's obviously driven by volume. And your answer is right. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why the volume of contacts is greater at digital world class. But at the end of the day, it's all about effectiveness. And so if I'm touching more, but I'm touching strategically, I'm going to have the results that I see on the right hand of this slide, which is I have a much lower average days delinquent. And if you're not measuring something like that, average days delinquent, percent current, some organizations like the collections effectiveness index, those are measures that I recommend. I know we all have to measure DSO. It's a Wall Street, external expected metric. But when you're managing receivables, you're a credit and collections manager, you want to know how effective you're performing. And average days delinquent is a great one, because regardless of the noise around terms, which I mentioned earlier. Sometimes we're doing it to ourselves by extending terms. It's going to grow DSO, by default. But the question is, even on those extended terms, are you getting your customers or ensuring your customers are paying you on time? And that's really what the average days delinquent metric exposes. Staying on topic here, percent of receivables that are over 90 days past due, certainly because of the practices, approaches that Digital World Class put in place, much lower percentage of those. But again, to my point earlier, it's not zero, right? So there are some that they have to chase, and they're chasing them strategically. And they also have a lower provision for percent of bad debt. And it's important to point out, and I'm maybe preaching to the choir for some of you, but there's certainly a difference between what we've reserved and provisioned for versus what we've actually written off. So again, certainly it's time consuming. It takes effort, collaboration with your colleagues in your accounting department, and having a good handle on what do we need to provision for. That's a potential write-off, but we hope it doesn't happen. That's equally important to look at, as well as just looking at overall bad debt. So we're going to do another poll, make sure everyone is still listening and engaged here. So what's your biggest challenge in accelerating cash flow? So is it slow customer payments and you're pushing them along? Is it disputes, which again, everyone has disputes when it comes down to good process and policy and tools? Do you have a lack of automation or AI, poor visibility into your metrics, or competing internal priorities? So I hope it's not the last one, because we just said top priority for CFOs this year is cash flow. So I'd be curious to know what a competing internal priority would be. So slow customer payments wins the day, and not surprised. It's a challenge. And that's the name of the game when it comes to collections. And what I'm going to talk about more is, how do you put into your processes ways to address customers that are paying slow? And it could be for a variety of reasons. And until you really unearth those root causes, you don't know why they're paying slow. Is it something you did? Is it, are they having financial constraints within their organization? Or, many times it's even looking past your customers and what is happening with your quote unquote customers. What industry do they serve? And is there something slowing down there? So again, common issues, lack or inaccurate information. You're kind of sailing, you're sailing a ship, but you've lost the compass, and you're really not sure which way you're going. You're going the way the wind is blowing you. So that's a challenge there. Understanding where your collectors are spending their time, and is it by direction, or are they self-directed, kind of trying to do the best they can? They're not equipped, and your collections team, there's opportunity for training. Going back to our service delivery model concept, that's a cornerstone there. Is there gaps upstream? So again, if we're focused here on how can we improve our collections process, our dispute resolution process, is it constantly hampered by the fact that we're not doing a good job of ingesting orders, making sure the order information is valid, which flows into our invoicing process? So, we should be measuring those things, and as an end-to-end focus, looking at where the pain points are that are showing up downstream, but they're happening further up in the process. Do you not have standard collection processes? So you may have gaps of excellence that you don't even know. And of course, they're being overshadowed by the challenges that you have because the process isn't standard. You're not following a standard process. And again, consistency is so critical when we're looking at ways to improve, because even if you're consistently doing something wrong, you have the opportunity to improve by looking at that data. If it's varied in different ways, it really makes it hard to unearth where the opportunities to make improvements. And of course, data management. It starts with what does our process look like? How do we execute the process? And then you overlay that with technology that improves the process itself, but also gives you an incredible source of data that you can mine to look to how to improve the whole customer experience in that space. So I'm going to dig a little more in here around the collections process itself, being proactive and segmenting. Again, foundational when we talk about how to have a really effective collections process. It certainly starts with segmentation. If you haven't done it, please do it. If you've done it once a year, maybe you want to do it more often. And if you're fortunate enough to have some technology that actually enables dynamic segmentation, then you're really on the right track. But segmentation starts first because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to collections. Customers are different by their risk profile, by how much business they're doing with you, and of course, how they're behaving with you. And then that gives you the opportunity to look at them differently and be proactive and early contacts. And it's in the form of customer service. So it's really the collections activity has really been redefined over a number of years now. Very different than just pure dialing for dollars and having to, if you're an effective collector, you're probably a little more harsh than others. Just describing the how it's been just characterized in the past. It's really evolved. Certainly, you need to have phone skills, and there comes a time where you need to be able to speak and negotiate to resolve discrepancies, get paid. But a lot of it has evolved into more of a customer service approach to early discovery of disputes and make sure everything is going well. But again, you can't do that for everyone. So where it starts with is segmenting your customer base, looking at it from these two dimensions. How much business do they do with you? And again, we like to say, every customer is, our favorite customer, our top customer. But reality is when you look at the data, you've got different categories of customers, ones that are strategic and critical to your business. You're critical to their business. They do a lot of business with you. So they're going to be in that high category in terms of value. And then how do they perform with you? You may have a strategic, customer, but they're just an awful payer. So how do you address those versus someone who just does a little business with you, but they pay you every time? You're certainly going to touch them in different ways. So step one is to create this great example of a 9-box segmentation of your customer base. And then you need to define, and we're giving you some guidance here of define how you're going to touch each of them. What is your contact strategy to make sure they're satisfied customers of yours, but you're also satisfied that they're paying you on time? So you're going to have high touch, medium touch, and low touch, and they each have different objectives, and they're going to be aligned with different segments of your customer base. And then ultimately what you want to get to is something like this. What is our contact strategy for each one of those segments? How are we going to touch them? Is, what segment is going to be proactive, early touch? And when do we need to get aggressive? And again, with the objective of getting as close to possible of being paid on time. That is the goal. And what, I'm excited to see as I, put my analyst hat on in this space of looking at software is a lot of this is becoming automated and digitized and dynamic. So, don't want to put a number on it, but if we spoke years ago about this certainly would be, let's get in a room, roll up our sleeves, a room full of whiteboards and start crunching this out and designing it. And it was a manual exercise. It's evolving into something that certainly you're giving it the guidance around defining your segments, defining your strategies, defining your contact approach, but then it's dynamic in a tool that the other part I love is it's identifying what's effective. A classic question that I've received probably for the past 10 plus years is, what is the most effective way to contact customers and get them to pay on time? It used to be a mystery. Now it is evolving in something you can look at through data that's being generated by tools you're using. And ultimately, you want to be able to define how your collections team, how your collectors are spending their time. So, this is an example of data that we've gathered from our performance study. In an average week, what percentage of a collector's time is spent on the following activities? And ultimately, you want them to be touching your customers. You want them to be making contacts. You want tools and technology to be doing all the pre-touch activities and post-touch documentation and follow-ups. So that's really the goal of a collector, to be creating a relationship essentially with customers. And the great component of technology is that a collector could go on vacation, someone else could step in that seat and deliver the same experience to their customers because of the tools and technologies that are being put in place in today's environment. So this is just a little bit of some of the top level functionalities that we expect to see. We're seeing customer segmentation and that strategy approach evolving into being dynamic and embedded in technology that allows it to change as we see changes in payment behavior, as we see changes in the growth of a company, or unfortunately, maybe a customer is shrinking with your relationship, and you need to address that as well and adjust them. The prioritized work list, so great, I log in as a collector, and the technology is telling me, here's what you need to do today. Here's what you forgot to do yesterday. And it gives me that. And it's automating some things. It's also, I'm logging in, and many of the AI agents and assistants are saying, hey, I already got your day started already for you. I didn't need any coffee, and I did these 10 things for you, sent out these, and may already have gotten some responses to it. So reminders and follow-up actions, that's being embedded and automated. So, that's the exciting thing I'm seeing in this space, is the technology. A lot of people worry about replacement. I just see enhancement. I see adding value to the work that I'm doing as a collector. And also, hey, maybe allowing me to go home on time, allowing me maybe not to work a weekend, because the technology is making me better at what I do today in the time that I'm being paid for. And then promise to pay. This is a critical component that is part of the lives of a collector. Is I got in touch with someone, they're a bit past due, and they're promising me that they're going to pay me next week. Years ago, this was a post-it note, an email, something I made a note of it somewhere. Now I need to remember to follow up on it, but I got 10 other calls to do, and I'm probably going to forget. The technology that exists today that track promises to pay, and this is a step-by-step. So if you look at it, there is step 1 through step 7. And if you don't have tools and technology in place, you certainly can't even consider getting into steps 5, 6, and 7. So, what are you basing escalation and automated escalation on? What are you systematically adjusting in terms of risk, both from a credit and a collections perspective? And how do you modify? Meaning, how do you dynamically change your collection approach for that customer, which evolves into a group of customers, which goes back to how we change segmentation. So, again, great slide to take as a team and look at it and say, what is our approach to managing promises to pay? Because that is a foundational piece of the collections process. So we're going to do another poll, and I'm going to actually pass it on to Becky to set this one up, and then to share the next set of slides.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. All right. Next poll question is, how confident are you that your organization is ready to leverage AI for receivables management? So we'll give you a few minutes to fill in your answer. The results are coming in. Oh, fairly even between somewhat confident and not yet confident. So just about 20% are very confident. So you're using AI to the maximum, but still a lot of opportunity to infuse more AI capabilities into your AR to realize some of these incredible results that Brian was talking about. So I'm going to just spend a few minutes kind of bringing it home here, and really leaning into why AI is so important to achieve the outcomes, particularly around DSO and working capital. So if you look at, to me, the three key areas that AI plays a major role for accounts receivable is being able to better forecast, right? To be able to predict payments, those use cases that Brian was talking about in terms of, being able to see and understand what's happening from an invoicing and payments perspective, and then quickly pinpointing that allows you to do better forecasting. We actually, Billtrust just did a study on the use of AI in AR, and in that 74% of the respondents, there were 500, improved their DSO by 6 days or more. And I think there was a very healthy percent, around 20% or so, that actually increased it more than 11 days. So there are proven results that use of AI in AR really drive these tangible benefits. We talked about boosting productivity. And again, back to what Brian said, it's not about reducing headcount. We heard at the beginning, AR teams are being expected to do more with less, and this allows you to scale. We have clients who literally have scaled through acquisitions and growth without having to add incremental headcount because of the use of AI. And then finally, just the insights, right? The ability to have those real-time dashboards and forecasting that allows everyone in the finance organization to make more informed decisions and really be able to predict cash flow more predictably. So let's move on then to what it looks like in practice. And again, I think Brian did a great job talking about the art of the possible. And I'm here to say, it's not just possible, it is reality. Those segmentation and that messy whiteboard literally gets automated. And by virtue of using AI and having that data layer, and in particular with Billtrust, because we process trillions of dollars worth of payments and have visibility into 13 million B2B payments, we have a unique platform or a set of data that allows the AI to be even smarter. And that's really what drives AI to be so powerful, is the data. So being able to have that visibility and set up those automated outreaches just makes the company much more efficient and helps you pinpoint the areas that might present the most exposure. Cash application, touchless cash application. We have customers who are realizing up to 95, I think there's one that 99%. And again, the AI capabilities, particularly within Billtrust, where we do confidence-based matching, so it doesn't have to be 100%, and we're able to distill the proper accounting, is literally allows the processing to be accelerated so much more. Automating dispute resolution, dynamic credit lines. Again, we have the visibility to see the behavior across the full continuum, and for example, automatically adjust business credit limits, whether up or down, to improve the great relationships you're having with customers, and throttle back where you're finding that their promise to pay is more delinquent than it has been. So there's so many means and ways and use cases. It's funny, the team we're talking about, like, how do you count how many ways you could use AI within accounts receivable? And it's literally impossible, particularly when you think about Gen AI and think about, the CFO asks for a report. Instead of pulling together multiple spreadsheets, you literally ask, in our case, it's Autopilot, but the Gen AI tool, and it feeds back the information that you need. So it's just limitless in terms of the possibilities. So finally, let's look at, what does it take to close the gap? Because, there's just so much possibility, but it takes work and methodical approach to really driving the adoption. First, as we look back at cash flow and DSO. One of the things that I think is important, and you have some benchmarking in the report that Brian talked about. Again, I talk about Billtrust data that we sit on, and we actually offer a service to be able to compare, share with you what companies that look like you in your industry, company size, number of invoices, et cetera, what are they realizing today in terms of days to pay, along with a myriad of other metrics, so that you can really understand where you stack rank, and then build on or enhance the areas that you have opportunity to improve on. It sounds silly, but just digitizing invoices. I'm still shocked that nearly 50% of B2B payments are still done through checks and print and mail, and certainly with government regulations and laws and compliance, the need to accelerate that and really fully digitize is more important than ever. Embracing AI, and again, it can be scary or daunting, or people think it's going to replace them. You hear too much of that in the news. The fact of the matter is, it is allowing individuals to become more valuable to their teams and to scale. But there is cultural change, and I think Brian certainly spoke about the need to make sure you have that training and adoption in a very formal way, so that you can maximize the use of the investment. And finally, it's just, AI is not a set it and forget it. You're just constantly optimizing the opportunity you have to take advantage of this in the market. So I would say don't be overwhelmed. There is so much out there. Take one use case at a time, and then just continue to build on that. So with that, I think that's the conclusion of our formal slides today. I really appreciate everyone taking the time. And hopefully you found a few nuggets of things that you can take back to your finance teams and drive some really material improvements to your business. So with that, Allison, do you want to tee up some questions? I think we have some.
Yes, great. So a couple of questions. I'll start with this one because it ties to what you just mentioned. But our AR team is really interested in embracing AI within our AR processes. We see the value, but it's a bit overwhelming knowing where exactly to start. From your perspective, what should we be evaluating from a people, process, and technology standpoint before moving forward?
I'll answer that, and then Brian, if you want to add anything to it. First of all, don't feel alone. We hear that all the time. This is a big change. It's the most, significant technology change we've had across the board. So getting people on board and embracing it is going to be foundational to, again, be able to maximize the value of it. I'd start first with just leveraging AI to give you the visibility. So for example, you can very easily pinpoint where a payment is stuck or what's a process is happening. So really looking at, from a process perspective, unpacking the workflows and creating those cohorts and making sure that you can see the measurable improvement to the process. And then from a technology perspective, it's do you have, especially if you leverage a third-party AR software like Billtrust, having the ability to have that all of that data to be able to feed the intelligence that will improve your AI is going to be just as important as the technology itself. Brian, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, Becky, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of use cases out there. So, if that question was asked 3-4 years ago, you might be, leading the pack, but that's not the case today. There's so many use cases of how AI is being leveraged in customer to cash today. So do a little research, but then most important, like we've talked about today, reflect on what your process looks like today. Where are the manual activities, the bottlenecks that we know AI helps to make more efficient and effective? And for any of you that are Billtrust users today, this is another thing that I see often is we think AI is something that's a standalone type of technology, but like we've heard today, Billtrust has AI built in. So you may just think that, well, we're not using AI today, but if you are on Billtrust platform, you are, and you need to, better appreciate and understand those AI capabilities that are built in. But to get started, I would say, look at your process. Where are the manual activities, and identify, start with tasks and activities. Don't say we're gonna use AI to completely change our cash application process or our collections process. You have to dig a little deeper and say, let's look at, level 2, level 3 activities that we do in there. And there's certainly AI use cases and opportunities to be leveraged. Yeah.
Awesome.
What else do we have, Allison?
Yeah, great. So next question came in around the second poll. And it is, what specific digital technologies that contribute most to the 67% reduction in process cost per collection contact?
Okay, so the reduction in costs, I mean, that cost and staffing metrics are outcomes. Okay, so this is similar to, we got a couple months before New Year's, right? And everyone wakes up and says, I step on the scale and say, I don't like the number. I want that number to change. Well, you have to do something to change the number. So same thing with cost and staffing. You do a benchmark and you're too high. You don't just simply say, okay, let's take 20 people and make them 10. That's an approach, but not a good one. Okay, you need to look at, how are we doing the work? What capabilities do we have in place? What are we lacking? What are our best practices? So to really unearth, there takes a little more to get to that answer of how do you reduce your staffing costs, but it's based on the decisions you make around how you execute your process. Do you have some of the fundamentals that we talked about today? Do you have segmentation? Do you have a contact strategy? That's going to yield benefits. And I also, for the person who asked the question just around the costs, I would first say, what does your AR health look like? So if you're super competitive, if you're not going to be 100%, but if you're darn near close 100% current receivables, you don't have problems with disputes, that first of all, I'll say congratulations. But that's when I would turn my focus on, can we get those same results at a better cost and fewer staff? So that's my guidance on that question. Okay.
I'd love to jump in. Just we've seen, just massive transformation in the collections processes with the introduction of AI and agentic capabilities. So not necessarily a cost reduction. Well, it is, but the metric here is, we introduced agentic email several months ago, and literally all of our clients are now leveraging that. We've gone from a collector taking up to 10, 12 minutes to process one collections in dispute to 2 minutes. And so not only does the AI help, as Brian says, you come in the morning and you've got your whole list prioritized based on, the most important to the least important. The technology serves up draft text, which you can accept, modify, quickly throw out, click out and send. So it's just all of those, again, the individual use cases, there's technology or an agent behind it that will drive process improvements, which again, ultimately manifest in the reduction of DSO. So.
That was a great segue into our next question. Our ERP is outdated. How can we still make progress toward automation or AI?
All right. Well,
you want to start, Becky?
Yeah, I'll just, we integrate with ERPs, and our hypothesis, but the fact is, the ability to layer on AI, AR, specifically software on top of your ERP is really the way to go. The ERPs just don't have the the depth of AI embedded in their applications. And furthermore, I know I sound like a broken record, but the depth of data that a company like Billtrust has to inform more intelligent AR is far superior than anything you would get through a siloed ERP. But Brian, love your thoughts.
Well, ERPs are not going away. I mean, that's kind of foundational. Every organization is going to have an ERP, and when I look at the technology landscape and how organizations are leveraging the features functionality of an ERP, they're looking at it and saying, okay, is it delivering what I need? Does it have the features and functionalities to deliver the performance levels that I want? Often the answer is no, and there's a number of factors. Industry, complexity of your products and services that you deliver, they're all going to be factors in there. But very often the answer is no. But you're not going to say, we're going to get rid of our ERP, because it does many things good, but unfortunately it doesn't do everything great. So that's where you need to look at it and say, okay, we're not going to get rid of our ERP, but we certainly have gaps in performance, and we need to look at where we can supplement it. And again, looking at a solution like Billtrust to say, okay, we need to enhance our, fill in the blank, our credit analysis, our cash application process, our collections, disputes, and it's going to just enhance. The ERP doesn't go away, but we're doing our work in a better platform.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. One more question about collections. So how often do a world-class organization update their segmentation criteria and strategy to maintain their performance?
I would say, table stakes is you're doing it once a year. If you've got some really good technology in place, it's dynamically happening for you. In today's environment, and Istvan, you've been fortunate to be a little quiet on the Q&A, but when you think about the organizations you worked with and how quickly the market is evolving, I'd like to say at least twice a year. But what do you think about the segmentation? Because I know you've actually done some hands-on work with clients in that space, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we usually, throughout our engagements, we do a lot of work to optimize collection strategies, which starts with the segmentation, right? And then back to the question, the recommendation is, if you do not have any tool to support a proactive automated segmentation, then you should be doing it at least yearly. But given the dynamics in the markets, now more and more organizations are doing this, even if only manually, at least twice a year or every quarter, right? Just to capture any significant changes in customer payment behavior. But I'm pretty sure Becky can give here some insights of how technology can enable this, because a lot of technologies can take over and automate these very tedious and manual tasks, and then really perform this refresh of the segmentation based on the various categories more frequently. So this way you are really able to proactively capture any changes in payment behavior and then act on those in a very short period of time.
Yep. And I'll just add on to that. I mean, that is the beauty of AI, and not only to be able to dynamically change segmentation as behaviors change, but also make a recommendation. So, we're finding that this cohort is looking and doing like this, we suggest making changes. So, and then you being able to reflect on those and then ultimately make the decision. So, do we have any more questions, Allison?
I'll squeeze in one more and then we'll wrap. When processing payments with AI, does it have to go through a specific platform, or can it be connected to a bank?
I'll go ahead and answer that. Particularly if you're paying on a platform like Billtrust, it is connected, and that's what then therefore gives you the deeper intelligence to be able to act and ingest those learnings and leverage them across your AR platform.
Okay, awesome. Well, I know we're at time. We got a few questions about if this session is being recorded, and we had some questions we didn't have time to answer. So we'll follow up with you after the webinar and answer those directly. But thank you to Brian, Esteban, and Becky for a great presentation, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.